Once upon a time, in fact, it was that very time when Napoleon was marching his soldiers up the back of Europe and down the front of Europe, there lived in a very small country called Bavaria, in a very small town called Rutenburg, two brothers named Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Jacob was the older, and he was very, very studious indeed. His head was filled to the top with writing books like a German dictionary. His younger brother Wilhelm was also studious, but not very. In fact, not even very. For half his head was filled with love for his wife, and half his head was filled with love for his children, and half his head was filled with love for all the children in the world, which, when you add it up, doesn't leave much room for dictionaries, does it? No. Now, these two brothers lived in Wilhelm's comfortable house and worked in the beautiful library of a beautiful palace for a not too beautiful duke. To tell the truth, the duke was a very fat, very old, very mean man who yelled especially loud when he found out that Jacob was spending all his time writing a dictionary and Wilhelm was spending all his time writing about dragons and fairies and magic fish, instead of writing a book about the Duke and his family. He hollered and screamed and yelled so loud that all the neighbors could hear him. So, naturally, Jacob ran right home and got right to work. And Wilhelm ran right home and got right into the arms of his children, who were much more important than any old duke. He kissed them and tucked them in and brought them a drink of water and then gave them what he always gave them, a good night story, which started like all bedtime stories should start. Once upon a time, there was a woodsman. He was tall and handsome and dressed almost all in green. He whistled as he walked through the forest and then suddenly stopped in front of a huge tree and knocked. Imagine that, he knocked on a tree. But imagine this, there was a door in the tree and it was opened by a gypsy. She invited him into her house, which was filled with things to make magic with, and he told his friend he had come to say goodbye, for he was off to try to marry the princess.
Woodsman, I have something for you. No one has ever given me a word of kindness but you. When others have scoffed, you alone have smiled.
Give me one smile in return and I'll be happy.
That you shall have, and something more.
And she handed him nothing. Or was it nothing? No, it was...
Take this cloak of invisibility. It will hide you from men's greed and protect you from their envy.
Will it help me to win the princess?
That you'll never know until you try.
So he put on the coat, and it really did make him invisible. Then he gave the gypsy a kiss goodbye and whistled his way once again through the forest until he came to the king's palace and stood right in front of the king's jester and the king's prime minister and the king's executioner and the king himself. And the woodsman bowed and bowed as the king said,
He bows very well, doesn't he?
Oh, very well indeed. Oh, stop it. That's enough. Who are you? No, let me guess. You are a prince in disguise.
Your Majesty, I'm just a humble woodsman.
Oh, that's wonderful. Ah, that's marvelous. Oh, a woodsman. That means that you are accustomed to the axe. Ah, to the axe. Ah, to the axe.
Everybody laughed at the king's joke. Well, because if they didn't laugh, he was liable to have their heads cut off. And when they were done laughing, the king and the prime minister read the rules. I mean, you just don't up and ask to marry a princess. You have to win her, and that means following the rules.
The rules.
He who
discovers how my daughter,
walks holes through her slippers every night.
without telling me how she does it. I tell you, another pair every night. It costs me a fortune. Proceed.
He who discovers the why and wherefore.
Gets half my kingdom. Oh, yes, and the princess, too. Now, tell him the bad part.
Whoever shall try and fail.
As all others have tried and failed, shall have his head separated from his body forevermore. Good luck, woodsman. But remember, don't lose your head. Ha! Ha! Oh, don't lose your head.
The woodsman, being very brave, was willing to take the chance. So he went to the bedroom of the princess to stand guard. In a little while she came out, and she was just as pretty as a pretty princess should be. And then, because it was a cold night, she gave him a warm drink. A drink which was supposed to put him to sleep. But the woodsman only pretended to drink it, and then pretended to fall asleep. And the princess ran out. Up jumped the woodsman, and putting on his invisible coat, he caught up to her just as she jumped into a carriage. He jumped on the back of the carriage, got a good grip, and off they went. And where did they end up? Why, in a gypsy camp, where everyone was laughing and dancing, including our princess. From gypsy to gypsy she danced, and the woodsman watched. Then off came his invisible cloak, and he put on a mask, and took the princess in his arms, and they danced. They danced the whole night through, and just as she reached to take off his mask to find out who he was... Uh-oh, there's the rooster crowing. It was getting late, and she had to be in bed before her father woke up. So quickly she ran back to her carriage, and the woodsman, putting his invisible cloak back on, jumped on the back. Well, it was really a wild ride, as you can well imagine. Up hills and down dirt roads and over narrow bridges where the woodsman almost fell off, and down 1,000 feet, and then back over more narrow roads until they finally reached the palace, where the princess got back to her room, and the woodsman went back before the king himself.
You tried and you failed. How sad. Too bad. Get to work.
Just a moment. Your Majesty, I know how the princess wears holes in her slippers.
I don't believe it. Not a word. Where does she walk?
Well, nowhere. She dances all night.
Fiddlestick. Alone in her bedroom?
No. She goes through a hidden door and then rides his carriage.
Oh, I've got you now. I know every hidden door, secret room, and sliding palace in the panel. The panel in the panel. Botheration, off with his head.
And the executioner was just about to cut off the woodsman's head when the woodsman showed the king the secret panel in the throne. Of course, inside the king was very happy because he really never liked to have people's heads cut off. So he turned to his daughter and said,
Nobody tells me anything. Now, you see, he guessed your secret every night, dancing and prancing. I'd love to dance, but nobody asks me. Well, a bargain is a bargain, so now we'll have a great big party.
There'll be no party. I shall never marry him.
Tut, 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 my girl. You're not the king. You're only a princess, which isn't as good. Besides, I gave my word.
And last night I gave my heart to a stranger.
And off she ran, but not quite quick enough. For the woodsman put on his mask so she'd know him, and then put the invisible cloak the gypsy gave him around both of them, and they danced off and lived happily ever after. And so they lived happily ever after, which is how a woodsman and a princess should live. However, there was one small problem. Wilhelm's wife, Dorothea, said it wasn't a woodsman at all, but a tailor. Naturally, this had to be straightened out. So Wilhelm went right to someone who was excellent at straightening things out, his brother Jacob.
By the way, you remember the story of the dancing princess? Whom did she marry, a woodsman or a tailor?
A farmer.
A farmer?
An honest, conscientious, hard-working farmer.
Now, everybody knows you can't have a princess marrying just anybody. I mean, she has to marry somebody, either a woodsman or a tailor or a farmer. So Wilhelm went to his good friend who owned a bookstore, and he said it was a fisherman. Poor princess. There she was, a happily married woman, only nobody knew whom she was married to. And no one could even find out. For believe it or not, there wasn't even one book of fairy tales in the whole world. Now, no one thought that was very important. Not Jacob or the Duke who hollered or anybody excepting Wilhelm. And even he wasn't positive, so he asked some children.
Now, don't be frightened. I just want to ask. Do you want a book of fairy tales?
No, sir.
Hup. Of course you do. Why not?
I can't read.
Well, you can hear, can't you?
Yes.
All right, then. Sit down.
And they sat down and got quiet, and then he said, once upon a time, and the time was the day before Christmas, there was an orphanage. Across the street from this orphanage was a tiny shop owned by an old cobbler with snowy white hair and bushy eyebrows, a big thick mustache, and funny glasses. He was the very favorite friend of the poor little orphans, but they were his only friends, because even though he worked very hard, his customers were never pleased. Why, on this very day before Christmas, the mayor himself said that if his shoes weren't ready for the king's party tomorrow, he would put the cobbler in jail. And a beautiful ballerina said he'd be boiled in oil, and a hunter said he'd be shot. And while he was thinking of all those terrible things, who should come in but the orphans from across the street?
I suppose you're going to the king's birthday party, too.
No, we came to sing for you.
Why?
'Cause you like us.
Do not. Why don't you, get jobs or get married?
Nobody asked me.
Well, then go and see your good luck elf. They handle those things for you.
Orphans don't have good luck elves.
Nonsense. Everybody's got good luck elves. If you don't believe in them, they won't come to you. I'll tell you about it sometime. Now, go home. I'm busy. Very, very busy. Go home.
You do like us, don't you?
Do not.
Do too.
Do not.
You got to. 'Cause nobody else does.
Well, naturally he liked them. In fact, he loved them so much that he decided to make them some good luck elves for Christmas presents. And when he finished making the elves, he tried to start working on the shoes for the mayor and the ballerina and the hunter, but he was so tired that he thought he'd close his eyes for just a second, and before you knew it, he was sound asleep. The whole shop was asleep, excepting a cuckoo clock. And who should it wake up but a good luck elf, the red one the cobbler had just made for the orphans. He woke up the blue elf.
Why?
Why what?
Why am I up?
Ask him.
Said the blue elf, pointing to the green elf. But nobody could answer him excepting the yellow elf, who said,
Because it's Christmas Eve.
Ha-ha! I've got it.
He's got it.
He can have it.
Christmas is the time for good cheer. Good cheer is what we bring because we're good luck elves.
I'd rather be a bad luck elf. Why? 'Cause he gave me a crooked mouth, that's why.
Don't you like your mouth?
No.
Then keep it shut. Unless those shoes are finished by morning, he's in terrible trouble.
Good. Serves him right.
Get to work. Everybody. Begin. Get busy. Commence. Go!
but they just stand there.
What's wrong?
How do you fix shoes?